Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to finish lesson 9, which is advanced compositing. If we look at the end file, and this is also sort of an introduction to our next assignment after the postcard assignment is completed. We're going to, and I will talk about it more next week. It's going to be a movie poster, and it will be an autobiographical movie poster. But this gives you the basic proportions and the layout of a movie poster. What we did the other day is that we created Frankenstein's monster. Today we're going to work on a few other features. We're going to build into it another tombstone here and add some effects and add some filters and a variety of things. And then we're going to use the history panel to go back and to erase some of them. That's one way of doing it. We're also going to enlarge an image and introduce that into our document here. That's this couple here in black and white. And when I talk about it, I will caution you about enlarging images too much. If they're the principal image, I don't recommend that. If they're an ancillary image like this and they're kind of sitting in the background, I think it's okay. They've really made a lot of improvements with regard to enlarging images over the years. So this is where we left off. Here's my Frankenstein's monster, and they already provided for us the title, so that's there. But now we need to add the little tombstone at the bottom, and we need to add the images at the top. And then that will take us to the end today for this. Okay, so the next file that they make available for us is this tombstone with RIP on it. And they want us to apply a variety of, as I said, of filters and layer adjustments and that sort of thing. So let's start with that. So one of the things that we could do to dress this up would be to go to filter. Whoops, I got to make sure that I have the layer selected. That would be helpful. I'm going to go to filter, and I'm going to go to render, and I'm going to select clouds difference. And make sure that your foreground and background color are black and white. Ta-da! It kind of dresses it up just a little bit, okay? The next thing that we might want to do to this, and before I do colorize this, is to caution you when you do it this way. That's why I copied the background layer, is that filters are destructive. They're permanent. You can go back. If you undo, hit Command Z, or in a few minutes, we'll show you how to use the history panel to go back. But once you've saved the file, this would be a permanent change that you can't go back. So the next thing that we want to do to this is we're going to use called a channel mixer. And that's this one right here, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create the channel mixer, and I'm going to add that to this. And we're going to leave the reds alone, but we're going to adjust the greens and the blues. So, and this will allow us to add color to this. So this is not only useful for doing creative things and that are, you know, that apply to maybe your aesthetic taste, but maybe the postcard assignment, or it could be a movie poster or anything else where you're combining images, especially images that are color and have different sources, and they include people. And you'll notice that when in different photographs that are color, the people's skin tones will not match. It could be of the same person that the skin tones don't match. And this color mixer or channel mixer would be a good way to adjust it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the green value and we're going to pump it up to 37%. And actually by itself, that kind of turns it red. And then we're going to take the blue and we're going to pump that all the way up to 108. Let's go to 100. No, let's go down. 108. Now, I did this, let's see. Let's go ahead and take the red out, okay, until we get more of a greenish tone. It's kind of blue right now, but let's push this over until it's more on the greenish side. Okay, so you can play with colors quite a bit, and you can add contrast, remove contrast, you know, and play with a number of the settings in here. Now, because this is an adjustment layer, this is non-destructive. Okay. But the clouds that we applied are destructive. Okie doke. So that's another thing that we're going to add to that. Another one is that we can brighten it up and add luminance to that. So let's add another adjustment layer. And I believe the luminance is this one right here. No, that's vibrance. No, I think we want to use brightness contrast first. So, or maybe it is luminance. Hold on here. Oh, we're going to change not luminance. My mistake. Let me throw this away. That's the, well, I did want the exposure. That is what I wanted. Okay, so let's go ahead and take exposure. And we're going to brighten it up a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and work with a slider. And notice how it affects, so it begins to look overexposed, or I can make it look underexposed. And again, all of these things are, because they are an adjustment layer, are non-destructive. So I want to go all the way up to maybe about 90. So let's do that to 0.90, 90%. Okay. So that affects that. Now, the next thing that we're going to do, and there was a brightness contrast, I believe I was supposed to add to that. It's not that critical because we're removing a bunch of this stuff anyway. I guess I add brightness contrast a little bit later. It's not important. But if you want to get rid of just about all of this stuff, what you do is you can go and you can click up on this little button right here. And if you don't see it, you can always go to Windows and you can bring up the history panel. So that's what that is. And let me go ahead and just pull that off like so. I'm going to move this up here too. Okay. So you can see that I've applied a number of effects, and I can go all the way back here to the opening. I can then click on each one of these until I get the desired effect that I want to leave with. And they wanted us to go all the way back here to clouds difference, and that's it. So it takes me back. Instead of using Command Z, we can do that. And now watch what happens when I add different things to this. For example, they want us to add some noise. So all these features that I added from below here will be removed permanently. So what I do up here now is if I go to filter and I go to noise and I say that I want to add noise. Okay, let's bring this down a little bit. You can see that it adds a little graininess to this. And we only want maybe 3%. So I'll go ahead, not a lot. Adding noise though can be a very useful feature for other purposes. For example, in your final assignment, you're going to be retouching, restoring perhaps an old photograph. And oftentimes old photographs or even relatively new photographs, if you're going to use those in one of your projects, has a graininess to it. And if you want to match all the other images to that graininess, adding noise could be very helpful. Okay, so that's one of the things that that can do. Then in addition to that, we're going to add one more feature to this. We're going to go to filters, and we're going to go to render, and we're going to add lighting effects. Let's hopefully can bring that up. And what I want to do is instead of spotlight, I want to use, well, they've changed this. I'll just use spotlight, okay? And then we can change the color of this. We can come in here and, oh, I know why, because I need to move this over. This is a black and white image right now. So if I drag this up, now I have a full color image, and I can select a nice bluish image from here. Okay, and I can control the amount of light from this center little dial in here. Okay, and lighten it up like so. That works pretty nice. So I've changed the color of it. I can also come over here and I can control the intensity of the light from here. This is similar to the blur that we've used in the past. That was something else they want us to add that I forgot about that. Okay, we can add colorize here. We can add ambient light. So here would be another one. So instead of this one, I'm going to slide this all the way down like so. And they want us to add, I think ambience is going to be like, I don't want that to be there. That should be okay. Now let's change the color of that to maybe something more in the greenish realm. Okay. And then we can change the exposure of this and crank that up a little bit. You can also affect the hot spot. We can crank that up a little or reduce the hot spot. Notice how that inner circle is increasing, decreasing. We can affect the glossiness of it from here if we wish. We can add a texture if we want. So that's pretty much it. I should probably go back in here. I want this to be a little bit darker. No, I'll leave it where it was. Not exactly like the textbook, but close enough. Now, when I'm done with it, I go ahead and I click OK at the top here. And it's colorizing it. And now I can, because these have been permanent changes, I can take this image and I can drag it over to my other file here. Now, remember that what I've done here are permanent changes. So when I click and I drag, but I have that other one, the original file is a background image, so I can always bring that back. So I'm going to go back to my background image here, and I'm going to drag this in here like so. Not the right color, but you get the idea. If I need to reassign a size to it, hit Command T, and then I like holding down the Shift and the Option key and resizing it like so. And if you're happy with that, great. If you're not, go back and edit the original. But that's why, as I said, if I bring back that image, let me go ahead and click the checkbox, and I go back to this one. I can always turn this layer off, turn this one back on, and I can start over again. Now, there is actually a better way to work. It doesn't work for all of the filters or the textures, but what we could do for some of this to be able to backtrack, and this is not in the textbook yet, is to turn this into a smart object. So I'm going to go to Layer, and I'm going to, before I do this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a copy of this layer. Again, I like just to save my behind. I like making copies of layers so I can always go back and make adjustments. I'm going to go to Layer, and I'm going to go to Smart Object, Convert to Smart Object. Okay, and you'll notice that in the Layers panel, the icon has changed a little bit so that it is a smart object. Now, not everything will be available to us. So when we begin editing this, but what I want to do is I want to go to Filter, and I'm going to go back to the the first one that we applied, which was the cloud difference. Now notice that was applied, but notice over to the right, it's no longer destructive. I can always turn this off or turn it back on, or I can go back to the smart filter and I can edit it, which is really kind of nice. Okay, so this gives me a lot of opportunity for those sorts of changes. Now, if I go to adjustments though, let's see which ones are available and which ones are not. So for example, I wanted to use the color mixer. I can use that. That's really kind of nice. So I can come back in here and I can go ahead and I can adjust the greens. I can adjust the blues. So let me slide this back a little bit. 37. Let's crank this one up. I think they wanted this. I don't remember the numbers. And I'm going to dial this one back. Okay, so this, I want this to be a little bit more on the greenish side. So notice what I'm doing, that by doing that, these filters and these adjustment layers are all, adjustment layers by nature are non-destructive, but the filters we apply are destructive. So what I can do before I drag this over, if I want to bring all of these adjustment layers over with me, I would have to select them all. So I'm going to select both of these. Actually, let's, hold down, select both of them. And now if I were to drag this over, it would drag both of them over with me. So I can click and drag and bring it over to our backdrop layer and then come back and bring it back in. And you can see that everything has been, let's just layer that on top. That by bringing that layer over, I have smart filters that have been applied. So I can now, in here, I can go back over and change. Now notice what it did up here. Okay, because remember that adjustment layers affect every layer beneath it. So I need to be very careful. I'm going to go ahead and come back in here and make sure that it's only affecting that layer, that adjustment layer. Okay, and no other layer, and that's it. So you need to make sure that you do that. Okay, if you choose to bring both of those layers over. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to bring the faces over. And it's a teeny tiny little image. And this may be something that you have already experienced with your postcard assignment. So what I want to do before I do anything else is I want to go to image size. Okay, to see how big this is. And this is only, 72 pixels per inch. Well, let's go check the resolution of the backdrop that we're working with. So I'm going to go to image size, and this is 150 pixels per inch. So if I bring it over, it's going to be really, really small. So I can change it ahead of time, which is what we're going to do now. We're going to take this face image, and I'm going to change it to 150 pixels per inch. So I'm going to go to image size. Okay. And when I do that, I want it to resample. So I can either do it by percentage. So instead of inches, I can use percentage. Right now, this is set to 100%. And they want us to do it in the book anyway. They want us to change this to 400%. So let's do it their way, and then I'll do it my way. So it's big. But when you do that and you have resample turned on, what you want to make sure that you do is that preserve details and enlargement. And at the same time, you want to reduce noise. Now, if I put that slider back, you'll notice all the artifacts and the noise that appears in the image. So this is a nice, relatively new feature. And usually the default setting is around 85%. Okay. So now what we can do is I can bring this image over. Okay, notice how much bigger it's gotten. It's a huge, huge image now. But it's going to shrink because it's 72 pixels per inch. It's going to shrink down a little bit when I drag it over. If you notice here that it's 12 inches wide by 16 inches tall. Now, if you think it's going to be that big when I drag it over, you're mistaken. I'm going to go ahead here and I got to make sure that it's converted to a normal layer. And I'm going to drag it over. Let me make sure here. Let me undo that. I'm going to double click, turn it into a normal layer. There we go. Now I'm going to drag it over to our background image. Now, remember that was supposed to be like 12 inches by whatever, huge. When I do that, much smaller, huh? Because what it did is that it converted it to from 72 pixels per inch to 150 pixels per inch. So that's one way of doing that. Okay, so let me move this up here. And this is on, I have it on the top layer, so I'm good to go. And I can add an adjustment layer to this to make it black and white if I want, because that's sort of what they have done. Okay, and make sure that it targets just that layer. And then I'm going to add a layer mask to this. But for the time being, I'm just going to turn it off. And I'm going to go back to that faces layer, and I'm going to undo what I had done before. So this goes back just to the opening file. Now watch what happens, that when I open that up, okay, this is 3 inches by 4 inches. It's a good size image, but watch what happens when I take it and I drag it over to our backdrop image now, and I bring it in there. Teeny tiny, way too small. And if I make it larger now, if I hit Command T to enlarge it, I will begin to see those artifacts. And I don't want to do that. It looks fine at the moment, but if I were to go back and I were to print this, you would see all of these artifacts and the noise, and I don't want that. So it's best to do that ahead of time before you bring it over. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that away. Now, as I said, there's a little bit different way of doing this. If I knew that I needed an image that was about 3 by 4 inches, if I know that I'm working with a file that's 150 pixels per inch, or in our case, for our classes, it's at least 200, preferably 240 to 300 pixels per inch, then what I would do over here is I would go to image size. Let's go to image size. And what I would do is I would leave Resample on, and I would leave it at 100%. Okay, let's switch from that to inches so we can see how big it is in inches. It's 3 by 4 inches. That's a nice size. But I would change the resolution to 150 so that when I drag it over, I would know, see, it's already enlarging it, that it would be approximately the right size and it would match the resolution. That's my preferred way of working rather than using percentages. Okay, so the last couple of things that we need to do is we need to go back over here. Let's turn this one back on. And I need to do a couple of things. I'm going to create a mask for this. So to do that, I'm going to select I want to use the elliptical marquee tool. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create it from the center. And I'm going to make about, I don't remember what the book wants, but I'm going to make it about a 10 pixel feather. Now let's make it, they want it quite a bit. So I'm going to start with maybe 40 or 50 pixels. And what that will do is it will soften the edge. And then from the center, I'll click and I'll drag to make my ellipse, like so. And if I need to move this about, I will also hold down the space bar, and that allows me to move the marching ants around. So that looks pretty good. I can make this a little bit wider and then move it over just a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to let go of the mouse first, then the option. Now what I want to do for this layer is I want to create a clipping mask. Notice how I have the nice soft edges. And probably the last thing that I want to do now is, because I want to turn this into a black and white image, is I'm going to turn that, I'm going to select adjustments, and the black and white filter or adjustment layer is right here. So I'll click on that, but notice what it does. It turns everything else into a black and white image. I don't want that. So I hold down the Option key, I move between those two layers and I click, and notice that it just affects that one layer, and that's it. Now what I can do is I can adjust the opacity for the layer. So let's take the layer and let's crank it down a little bit. Nope, wrong layer, my mistake. And make sure that I go back. Let's go back to the layer with the clipping mask. This is the one that I want to adjust the opacity. There we go. There we go. So it blends a little bit better. I can also take their image and I can hit Command T. Now, because I want it, you'll notice right now that if I hit Command T and I resize this, it resizes the mask as well as the image. Okay, if I only want to resize the image, I can do so. But what I need to do is, let's cancel this, is there's a little link between the image and the mask. If I click on that, it unlinks the two. So now I can take the image and I can hit Command T, and now I can resize it a little bit, make it a little bit smaller within that mask. Maybe if that's what I want, then that will work. Now, before I go any further though, I need to make sure that I relink those two. Now, see what I've done? I probably wanted to make that bigger. Now the edge of that image is being shown. So I'm going to undo that. And let's go back. Let's go back a couple steps. So probably what I want to do is I want to, let's make the image a little bit bigger, because I can see kind of a sharp edge along the top, or maybe I just need to move it. So let's use the move tool. And let's move that down a little bit, or move it up. There you go. Let's move it up a little bit. Now I no longer see that sharp image. And then I want to go back and I want to link those layers together so that when I move it about, I move the mask as well as the image. Okay. And then I can come back with that layer selected and I can adjust the opacity again if I want. And that again is non-destructive. And I can always move it anywhere I want. And if I want to resize it, Command T, I'll shrink it down just a little bit, just so it's not a dominant image. Hit return, and I'm good to go. So there's our poster for today. We finished it all. Any questions from any of you? So not only do these effects apply to this lesson, but I hope that you take away from this lesson that many of these procedures for creating more complex compositing can be applied to all of your projects, not just this lesson. Many of the things that we did in here could work really well for your postcard assignment. They'll definitely work really well for your movie poster when we get started on that. For example, if I select the image of the people again, and let's turn off the black and white for a minute. And maybe I want to check another kind of effect that I can have on this. I can go to image. Well, let's go to image, adjustments, and let's select, for example, invert. Notice the effect I'm getting from that. It gives me kind of a negative light quality. Maybe that's the look that I'm going for. Because when you work on your postcard, or especially your movie poster, it doesn't have to look realistic. You can, move towards any number of aesthetic effects. I can always turn the black and white filter back on. That's another thing that I can do. I can also take from that, let's see what we can do with different modes. Right now, this is set to normal. What if I select dissolve? Notice the graininess that appears. If I darken it, that doesn't work for me. If I select multiply, that doesn't work for me. Color, no, not really. You know, but you never know when you select some of these, you know, lightness, screen, if it's a little bit more subtle. This one is kind of cool. This is color dodge. It's very subtle. I kind of like this better, and I'd probably make them a little bit larger. They look a little bit creepier. And again, this would be a non-destructive adjustment to this. So let me go ahead and make them a little bit bigger again. I kind of like that a lot. You know, they look really creepy in that. That's more to my liking with a movie poster. And, you know, I don't know whether they're the ones that I should be afraid of, not the monster. But again, because I've added color dodge to this, I can always go back and I can go back to normal. Takes me back to where I was. And we can always adjust the opacity and lighten that up a little bit. Or increase it, you know, you have, so you're just, you know, your discretion. Okay, so that's it for this. Next week, what I would like to do is I would like to go over some of your postcards and give you some feedback, and also introduce and talk about the next assignment, the movie poster. Show you examples of past student work. Also talk about concepts in movie posters and general properties of movie poster design that you need to take into consideration and things like that. And then the week after that, after you've started on the movie poster assignment, I'll talk about the mixer brush tool, because that will lead into the next assignment, which will be to do a digital painting using Photoshop. Okay, any questions? No? We're kind of done a little bit early today. No? Sure. Let me go ahead and turn off. Go ahead and pause the reading. If you have a huge list of filters and properties that you have assigned to your project, and you're not sure whether you want to keep them or not, and you haven't been working in a non-destructive way, you can always click on this little button in the history panel, and it will create a new document from this current state. So that's something to think about. The other one next to it, the camera, will create a snapshot for you. So if I do that, okay, let me make sure that I do it. Let's go back up to the top. Well, here's that one. I can get rid of this snapshot. Boom. But here's that snapshot. Here's the one that we've been working on. If I want to go all the way back to the original, I can go to there. If I want to go back to here, and I can come back down here, and we can proceed to activate all of these, and I can bring this back. So technically, I could start over again, but with this other snapshot created, I could go back and I could, you know, pick up where I left off here, or maybe I decided, you know, I don't want the layer mask, or I do, or, you know, you can start and stop at any point along here. Or, as I said, I could always go back to the original and I could pick up from there, and still I could bring this snapshot back at any time. So the history panel is a bit unused these days because it wasn't that long ago that you didn't have multiple undos in Photoshop. Now you do. Photoshop traditionally has been a real memory hog. It takes up a lot of memory. So you didn't have multiple undos. You had one or two, and that was it. I think maybe just one. And then if you wanted to go back multiple steps, you had to use the history panel. But because, I mean, I find that I don't use it that much anymore because I try really, really hard to work non-destructively with my layers. So at any point in time, I can turn them off or turn them back on. Now notice what I did when I did that. Notice how it changed that snapshot, the layer visibility. For that, that's not what I want to do. So let me go back and undo that. Let's go back to the original snapshot here. Yeah, you got to be careful. See, when I'm doing it this way, because you can lose a lot of work very quickly. There we go. So yeah, I just lost all of those effects. So I made a snapshot of it, but let's see if we can't bring those back. No, I lost them all. So that's why I'm not real crazy about the history panel. It works for a few things, but now that there are multiple undos available, I would use that. And more importantly, I would make sure that as you work, either work with smart objects so that the filters that you apply are non-destructive, or just remember that when you're working with adjustment layers, you know automatically that those are non-destructive, and then you're in good shape. Okay, that you can always turn them on or turn them off at will. Okay, for example, I would want to go back and I would want to edit the headstone to make it look like the other ones. Okay. So if there aren't any questions, then that will be it for today. We're running up against the hour anyway. Let me go ahead and pause the recording. So that was all. I just wanted to say goodbye and have a good weekend. I look forward to seeing everybody's postcards, and we'll be talking about those next week. Okay? Okay. Bye-bye.